Hello everybody, and welcome to another video where I talk about emulation on Microsoft Surface Pro 2. This time we're talking about PSP emulation. And I know to some of you it may seem like a step down, because PSP is already a handheld console. But you are going to see what an actually powerful machine is able to do with games that used to run on PSP in a very low resolution. So we're talking about some amazing upscaling, like 3 or 4 times. We're talking about some very high quality effects, and we have to keep in mind that the original PSP came out in 2004 and it had a ridiculously low resolution of 480 by 272. You know, it was ridiculously low even by those standards, because for instance I remember that back in those days I had a Pocket PC which had a solid 640 by 480, and its screen was a little bit smaller than that. So it was done purposely, of course, because it was one of the ways to compensate for the low performance of this console. But it was impressive for the time anyway. Okay, so the first game that we have here is Daxter. It's a PSP exclusive, and it features Daxter from Jack and Daxter, or Jack and Daxter, that can be found on the PS2. And as you can see, the game runs with 100% speed. The frame skip is set to 0. Obviously, and the upscaling is really impressive. So let's talk about different aspects of upscaling that we have in PSP games. So first of all, of course, you have the models themselves, right? The polygonal models. Of course, the process of emulation cannot upscale the models to make them to make the level of detail higher, obviously, yeah. But what it can do is it can remove pixelization. For example, if you had, let's say, a model that looks pixelated, then it will not look pixelated anymore if you play it in a really high resolution. So for 3D games, upscaling does something amazing. When it comes to textures, however, of course, there is a bit of a letdown, because there can be some filtering, but of course we're not going to get any details, and the textures that were, I suppose, originally optimized for the console and were made in a low resolution, I don't know, maybe 256 by 256, some of them maybe 128 by 128, something like that, probably for the smaller objects and such. Of course, that's not going to change, and neither are sprites and 2D things that you see here, such as for example the grass and interface elements and so on. However, there is one more thing, and we're also talking about 2D that will change, and unfortunately I don't have a very good game to demonstrate that, and one of those games would be Loco Roco or Patapon, because they feature, if I'm not mistaken, because I don't know much about this terminology, they feature Bezier. So they feature, basically they feature curved geometry that is not already, you know, pre-rendered, such as a bitmap, but instead, so for example, that was a bitmap, yes, the egg that we have just picked, it was just drawn at you know where the pixels are located, and if you upscale it, yeah, then of course you're going to get a lower resolution pixelated thing. So yeah, when we talk about such things as curves, we're talking about vector graphics, and as a result they can be upscaled to any kind of resolution. Yeah, they can be upscaled as many times as you wanted, and games such as, for example, Loco Roco and Petapon that I have mentioned, they just look simply amazing. You have to try that. So the next game I'll show you is Ghost in the Shell. To be honest with you, I never really got into this game, but this is a nice demonstration of how the original PSP experience can be improved if you emulate its games. As you can see, it's a first-person shooter, and the original PSP only had one analog controller, and in order to aim, you had to use the buttons such as square, triangle, X and circle, and as you can imagine, it wasn't a nice experience. In many games there was no auto-aim actually, and you know, we were back in those days of hardcore portable gaming, and something actually went wrong, because on a tiny console such as PSP, you had the original experience of a console, and it was amazing, but many people actually disliked that, and that's why we are now back to something more like you know, tablet gaming and some very shallow mobile gaming. But maybe Nintendo Switch will change a lot of things in perception of mobile gaming. Who knows? I actually hope for that. Okay, one more game. Grand Theft Auto. Yes, you gotta love Grand Theft Auto. I think that everybody loves Grand Theft Auto. You just kind of dislike this game. You can dislike this series. Some people prefer Vice City, some people love San Andreas, some people say 4 is better, 5 is better. There are even some fans of GTA 2. But anyway, you just have to give the credit where the credit is due. The game is something special. The series is something special. There is just so much fun and freedom about it. But it's difficult to convey, really. It really is something that we can call the magic of game design, and it's something that many other games lack. So I know that, of course, this game has been reissued for different platforms, and it was even re-released for Android recently. But these kinds of ports do not really interest me, because sometimes they're clumsy, and this is what I read about the Android port, and I dislike them in general. I actually bought this game twice, first for the original PSP, and the second time was for the PS Vita, and unfortunately I never actually completed them. And while I was doing this review, I just got the idea of playing this game once again and actually beating it, especially because I had the save states. I wouldn't say that the GTA series are too hard, you know. There are some moments when the game gets a little bit difficult, and if you screw up you have to start not really from scratch, but there's a lot of repetition, unfortunately. For example, sometimes you have to drive a very long way just to get to the mission, and back in this game there was no taxi that could get you to the mission. Well, let's say that there was a taxi that could get you back to the mission if you got into a hospital, for instance, but you couldn't just call a taxi and tell them where to go. So how does this game stand the test of time? Well, I think it's quite good. We understand that such a huge game that was actually put onto a small 2 gigabyte UMD disk is already a miracle, because there is so much content. If you talk about radio stations, how many radio stations are there? Like 7, 8 radio stations with a lot of tracks. That's already some content. You also have this huge cities. Of course, the models are very, very basic. Yes, they are still very square, and of course, the designers, the modelers, they try their best, and we understand that they tried to make characters look as good as they could, but they had very, very low poly look anyway. And the textures, I would say that there is a big inconsistency in textures, even if you look at surfaces. Some textures are quite okay. For example, if you look at the wall here, yeah, this is alright, but sometimes you just drive and you see that some textures are huge, they're stretched, and they don't look really pixelated, but they really do look blurry, and there's nothing that can be done about it, you know. The game is already a miracle for its time, in terms of performance, in terms of its scale and such. So this is just another example of a game that can still be enjoyed even today, and I definitely recommend to play it. I was surprised at how much fun I had. You know, it's like GTA 6 for me, because I completed all parts of GTA, including even some more obscure things such as GTA Chinatown and GTA London 1969? 68? Forgot. So anyway, this and Vice City Stories are the last chapters of the GTA series that I haven't played, and once again, gotta tell you, they didn't disappoint me at all. We've got Marvel Nemesis Rise of the Imperfects. I think that this game is not very popular and may seem unfamiliar to many of you, and maybe that's actually deserved, because this game is a 3D fighting game. When it comes to 3D fighting games, we have, you know, pseudo 3D fighting games, such as basically all modern classic fighting games, such as Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, Killer Instinct, for example. Yeah, all of these are just 2D games in 3D. Right, they use 3D models, they use 3D stages, but you only have 2 dimensions where you move, and that's okay. That's perfectly fine. This is the original idea of a fighting game. And this game is a real 3D fighting game, and it's not like Tekken, which is basically also 2D fighting with some freedom where you can maneuver. But this game actually is more of a 3D action, perhaps, in terms of its controls, or maybe beat 'em up, except for the fact that you just fight against one enemy, so it's an arena fighter. And these games are usually very clumsy. They really don't feel like fighting games. There isn't much in terms of you know, mastering these games. So anyway, it can be fun for a little bit, and personally I like fighting games featuring different comic book heroes, and of course this game can be compared to such gems as Marvel vs. Capcom, but anyway, this is something you can play. So it's just a test of a random game to show you guys that PSP is emulated quite well. Again, we're talking about some major upscaling, and the resolution is really high. You can see that the details of models are really impressive. The highway, on the other hand, the road, the ground, and some objects, of course, this is nothing impressive at all, because the textures are very, very low quality. But the characters, they look really detailed. I think that they used textures that were probably too good for the original PSP and its resolution, but as a result we can enjoy these games even today. So that's one more game for you. Now, what about some real fighting games? Street Fighter Alpha 3 Max. This is, of course, just a re-release of the same game. I haven't actually played the original, but I guess that the content is quite the same, with everything unlocked and with a ton of different modes. And the first thing you have to do, yes, for this and many other games, is get back to the original aspect ratio. You don't want your fighters looked squashed. This is horrible, and I can imagine why many people would do that, because they don't want to look at the black frames on the sides, but this is absolutely horrible. So we get back to the original resolution. Actually, in this game you can set some kind of a wallpaper instead of the black frames, but we don't really care. Black borders are just fine. Okay, so here we are with Den Hibiki, which actually means echo in Japanese, and we unfortunately were badly beaten by N. Bison in the boss fight. So if you look at the game itself, I think that it's actually very well emulated, and the PS2 emulator and actually many emulators of later consoles, they have a slight problem with 2D graphics. So for example, playing proper 2D game on a PS2 emulator is usually worse than playing it on your PSP, and this is something you should note. So I would never pick a game such as, for example, Metal Gear Solid, which runs both on your PSP and PS2. I would never pick the PS2 version, just because it uses a slightly different rendering algorithm, and it causes some blocks to appear, so it's not really good at drawing sprites. However, PSP is just perfect. Of course, I'm not even talking about 100% speed. I think this is obvious. What about some filtering? Can we see pixels? Well, I don't know what to compare it to, but in general the image quality is more than satisfactory, and the game can still be enjoyed today. I know that there are some fans of Street Fighter Alpha, and they still believe that this is the best Street Fighter. Don't know about that. For me, that would be Street Fighter 2 and Street Fighter 4 probably. But of course, we're not here to judge each other's tastes. Speaking of fighting games, there is one of the most popular fighting games for the system, and that is Tekken 5 Dark Resurrection. If we look at the cinematics, we can see that they are not perfect. They are actually worse than the PS2 cinematics, and it can only be explained by the size of the media used by these two different systems. While the UMD of the PlayStation Portable is 2 GB maximum, the PlayStation discs, which are proper DVD discs of 4.7 GB and even double their discs, some games can have size of 8 GB and more. And this is actually the case of, for example, God of War, some other games, especially the later games. So this is one of the things to keep in mind. If you want better cinematics, you usually go for the PS2 version. But if we look at the quality of the models here, it's absolutely amazing. You can see even the hair dynamics are perfect. And even though this game was released a long time ago, more than 10 years ago, I think it still holds up quite nicely. and it's still playable, and it's not much worse than Tekken 7, basically. So here you go, one more amazing fighting game to play on the PSP or its emulator, as we can see. Again, I'm not even talking about performance, I'm not talking about the absence of glitches, because these things are obvious. So the PlayStation emulator for Microsoft Windows is just perfect. Of course, PSP is not only about fighting games, even though this is one of its strengths, I would say. So we also have extreme sports games such as SSX, and I know that many people like this game. Personally, I prefer Neversoft games released by this amazing group that doesn't exist anymore. This really cool company that made different extreme sports games. The most famous of them was, of course, Tony Hawk. This one was made by EA Sports, and you can tell that I'm not very good at this game. Don't really know how to pull the tricks and do all the stuff, but the game is still fun. Of course, nowadays the background doesn't look too good. I mean, you can see that it's pretty low resolution, and it's just a huge sphere that we are actually inside of, and we have a very, very low resolution background and texture on the sphere. Yeah, speaking of textures, as you can see, again, the upscaling gives us the same results, which is a little bit of a pity. So the results are the following. We have pretty high resolution of textures on different objects, such as the player models and small objects in general. But when it comes to terrain, when it comes to the snow, for example, or this ice cave, we can see that the textures really feature a very, very low resolution, and there's nothing that can be done about it. I mean, there are only two things that can be done. The first of them is to just leave the texture as is, and it will be very, very pixelated. Or the second thing is to apply some smoothing algorithm, and as a result we are going to get something blurry and not really clear, but hopefully while playing we can forget about it and just ignore the low quality textures. So anyway, thanks for watching. Next up is the proper Wii emulation on Microsoft Surface Pro, and thank you for watching. See you.